The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the set of my show, The Right Side. Doug Billings here. Today on the program, an interview with two separate individuals. One, Thad Snider, a citizen of the state of Kansas who's interested in election integrity, like we all are, who's raised some interesting questions. I had him on the show yesterday. We put the interview out, and it caused a little bit of a stir among conservative circles and such within the state and the nation, for that matter. The office of Kris Kobach, the state attorney general for the state of Kansas, reached out to me today and asked if he could come on and respond to some of these things that Mr. Snider had said the other day on the interview. Of course, we would be happy to have the attorney general come on the program, and he did. So today you'll see two interviews, very short in and of by themselves. First from Thad Snider, who's concerned about documents in the state of Kansas, election documents, whereby the county, according to Mr. Snider, the county commissioner in Johnson County, Kansas, Mike Kelly, is threatening to destroy and do away with. And of course, that would be a crime. These documents have a stay of destruction order on them from the previous state attorney general. And then after the Mr. Snider interview, we will have the attorney general from the state of Kansas, Kris Kobach, come on and respond to these issues. And I think that you'll find the interviews enlightening and interesting, and they speak for themselves. I'll let them do just that, and I'll bow out here and introduce you to the interviews that we did yesterday and today, right here on The Right Side with Doug Billings. Cheers. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the set of my show, The Right Side. Today, a special short edition of the program with a guest, Thad Snider from Kansas. Now, Kansas is flyover country. I get it. Look, I live there. I live in Kansas. But nonetheless, I think that what we see in Kansas can be a bellwether for what happens across the country in many aspects. In one particular, election integrity issues, we have an active criminal investigation happening in Kansas with regards to election integrity. Criminal investigation happening right now. I'm going to let Thad Snider explain it. And we have a series of people involved in this, from our county commissioners, our county election director, even the state attorney general, who was supposed to be one of us, a conservative who ran on and spoke about election integrity and getting to the bottom of things like this. Without me muddying up the waters a bit, I'm going to bring Thad on right now. Let him explain this to us. Thad, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
So a big deal in Kansas, and I want to point out to the country and to the world that this can affect and happen in other states as well. So take heed and take warning. Surmise for us in about 4 or 5 minutes what's happening in Kansas.
So our sheriff, Calvin Hayden, has had an active criminal investigation into the 2020 election for a couple of years now. And during the course of that investigation, True the Vote outed Johnson County as one of the counties that had CONEC, the Chinese Communist Party software, running its election management system. So this is a big deal. It's a huge investigation. And during the course of the investigation, the previous Attorney General, Derek Schmidt, issued a stay of destruction of the 2020 election materials pending the outcome of this investigation. Well, the investigation is still ongoing, but last week I found out that the Johnson County Commission voted to appoint a bipartisan duo to oversee the destruction of those materials despite that stay of destruction. And this is being done in coordination with the Kansas Secretary of State and the county elections director, Fred Sherman. So this is a conspiracy to obstruct justice. If they destroy that material during an active criminal investigation, it looks like they're hiding something. There is no reason to destroy that material outside of the fact that they are hiding something. And our supposed constitutional conservative Attorney General, Kris Kobach, who used to be the Secretary of State during the time period in which we use CONEC, by the way, will not do anything to aid Sheriff Hayden in getting to those materials. We need those materials subpoenaed. And I have urged President Trump and his team, and I know you put in a good word for me as well with his team, to go ahead and subpoena that material because it could be exculpatory in his January 6th case.
You're right. And Kris Kobach is a name that the national audience would recognize too. We made a bid to be part of President Trump's team, in fact. And so it's surprising that you have somebody like Kris Kobach, who is apparently and obviously lackadaisical or completely inactive in his approach to this. Now,
well, the absentia, sorry to interrupt, Doug, but the absentia from the investigation is bewildering to me. And I've even had a call from his chief of staff asking me to stop calling out Kris for not doing anything about election integrity, because he said he doesn't have the statutory authority over election crimes, which is a bald-faced lie. Our statute, Kansas statute 25-24-35, gives 4 people statutory authority over election crimes. That's the county election attorney, I'm sorry, not the county election, the county attorney, the district attorney of the county, the secretary of state, and the Kansas attorney general. And to say that he doesn't have the authority over it, and plus this is a national security issue. If the Chinese Communist Party was running our elections in our largest county, you would think that there would be more of an impetus at that level to look into it and see how far did they make it into the state.
And the county commission's assignment here of a quote unquote bipartisan team to destroy this. My hunch is, and I'm sure you would agree, that a stay of destruction for documents involved in an ongoing criminal case has no expiration date, right?
That's correct. That's correct. I even spoke to Sheriff Hayden directly about this, and I asked him, I was like, does it have an expiry? And he said no. And I think he's going to try to coordinate with Kris Kobach to see if he will do something. But to this point, I've heard nothing. I've seen nothing. And, his behavior to this point has been completely laissez-faire when it comes to election integrity issues, which is, counter-indicative of how he's, presented himself in the past. This was a guy who was going on Bannon's war room and pretending to be all based and stuff. And now here we are with a true issue that we could really use his help here in Kansas, and he's just sitting on his hands.
Well, we're going to call him out. Kris Kobach is welcome to come on the show and explain himself. Kris, if you're out there, if your team is watching, you're always welcome to come on. This is an important issue. Ladies and gentlemen across the country, beware. Keep your radar up and be aware of your county commissioners, your county election directors, your state attorney general with regards to everything that has to do with election integrity, because where it can happen in Kansas, it can happen in your state as well. We're going to try to get General Flynn on this. We're going to once again contact the Trump people and see if we can get their attention and to them for them to shine a light on this. Thad, I can't thank you enough for pointing this out. It's an important issue, not just to the state of Kansas, but to our republic. To your point, if we have the Chinese in here involved in Kansas, who knows where else they might be involved. What are, in about a minute or so, some closing thoughts, Thad?
Well, like you said, this is the Chinese Communist Party was running the election management system in Johnson County for 7 years. They had, through the charging documents in LA County, we know that they had super administrative privileges to our election management system, which also had access to our inventory, such as the machines, the serial numbers, which precincts they were used. And if you give the Chinese Communist Party an open door like that, there's no telling what they did in that 7 years that they had that open door to play with.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Thad Snider from the state of Kansas, and a call out to our Attorney General, Kris Kobach. Where are you? Come and talk to us. Ladies and gentlemen, where it can happen here in Kansas, it can happen to you in your state. Believe it. For the Republic. Cheers.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the set of my show, The Right Side. I'm Doug Billings. A big day here today in the studio. We had an interview yesterday with a resident of the state of Kansas by the name of Thad Snider. Thad is becoming fairly well known within the state and the nation with regards to the issue of election integrity. He brought up a couple of issues that involve a potential criminal case involving election integrity issues as being handled by Johnson County Sheriff, Johnson County, Kansas, Sheriff Calvin Hayden, and the destruction of certain documents that have been preserved through an order of a stay of destruction order, which is still in effect, according to current State Attorney General Kris Kobach, who's coming up on the show next. Attorney General Kobach called me and wanted to come on the show to respond to the interview that I had with Thad Snider. I, in full transparency, voted for Kris Kobach. I find him to be a conservative attorney general. I support his work and always think that it's interesting when he comes on and enlightening when he comes on the program. He's been on the show before. We've met in private life at various events around the state. And here he is today, coming on to respond to whether or not he and his office has the ability and the power to investigate certain crimes. I'm going to let him explain it in his own words, these crimes that involve election integrity. I think that you'll find his answers intuitive and straightforward and to the point. Ladies and gentlemen, my interview with Kansas State Attorney General Kris Kobach. Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Right Side with Doug Billings. Thanks for tuning in from around the world. Coming to you from smack dab, as we always do, in the middle of the fruited plain in the state of Kansas. Kris Kobach, the Kansas Attorney General, gracious enough to join us in response to an interview that I had the other day with local Kansan Thad Snider. We were talking about election integrity. There's an ongoing case, apparently. I'm going to let the Attorney General talk a lot about this. In the state of Kansas, we have Johnson County, Kansas, probably the most populous county in the entire state. And we have a sheriff here, a constitutional sheriff by the name of Calvin Hayden, who is conducting an investigation into several aspects of election integrity. I'm just going to leave it at that. I am not an attorney general. I don't play one on TV, nor am I a sheriff. But I do have Kris Kobach here, who is this Kansas State Attorney General. And Kris, I want to give you a chance to reply to some of the things that you saw on the show the other day.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. As many of your viewers know, I have been on the voting integrity crusade for quite a long time. Before I address some of the things that Mr. Snider said that are incorrect, I would like to just remind viewers kind of my history in this thing.
Yes.
So when I became Secretary of State in January of 2011, I immediately drafted the Secure and Fair Elections Act personally with the help from other attorneys in the Secretary of State's office. And that made Kansas, without question, the most secure state in the country. Now, no state is voter fraud can happen anywhere, no matter how good your laws are. But without question, we were the only state that has had photo ID as well as equivalent security for mail-in ballots, where you provide your Kansas driver's license number and or a photocopy of a photo ID and signature verification and proof of citizenship. And I drafted that law. Then I defended that law in court. And one of the elements that was in the original draft of the law that some moderates in the Kansas Senate stripped from the law, which I fought year after year after year to finally get added in 2015, was prosecution authority. Because what I found was that if prosecution authority as it existed then, only in the hands of county attorneys, wasn't being exercised to prosecute election crimes. And I finally got the legislature to do that in 2015. Then in 2016, it was already ongoing, the ACLU was attacking our proof of citizenship requirement. That is a long legal saga that my office fought through the district court level. Then the Kansas Attorney General at the time, Derek Schmidt, his office took it to the Court of Appeals level. That is a battle that I hope is not over. I mean, that case is over, but I'm convinced the U.S. Supreme Court would rule in our favor had the U.S. Supreme Court taken the case. Then fast forward to 2017, President Trump is elected and he nominates me or chooses me as the head of his Election Integrity Commission, which I lead. And then the commission is disbanded. I won't go into the details unless you want to, but that was a very interesting disbanded, it appears, at the behest of Vice President Pence's office. Without any foreknowledge, no warning given to us commissioners who are trying to fight against voter fraud. And of course, that was in 2017, prior to the 2020 election.
Well, Kris, can I just ask one question about that?
Yeah.
Do you have any gut feeling that you can share with us as to why, if Mike Pence, or whomever did it, what would have been the motive?
I don't know if it was Vice President Pence himself or his staff, but I think their motive was they just didn't want the fight. The commission was hit with more than a dozen lawsuits, more than any presidential commission in the history of presidential commissions. And we were ready to fight it out, and we were fighting it out. But I think they lost the stomach for the legal battles. Yep. But hey, when you take a stand, you've got to be willing to fight those legal battles through. Yep. So those are 5 things. Those are 4 things. Then number 5 was after the 2020 election, many people will remember the lawsuit that the state of Texas brought against the 4 states that changed their election rules without any legislative action, meaning it was unconstitutional. That lawsuit was drafted by a group of 5 attorneys who assisted the state of Texas. I was one of those 5 attorneys behind the scenes drafting that lawsuit. And unfortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to, they found that there was no standing for Texas I believe that was an erroneous decision, but that's water under the bridge now. Now, fast forward to 2021. There's a bill moving the Kansas legislature on election reform. I call the principal author of the bill and say, hey, I'd like to put another signature verification requirement in Kansas law. We already had one when you request the absentee ballot. We added one in the 2021 law when the ballot is returned. So that's my history in pushing to secure Kansas elections. And if you ask anybody in the ACLU, they will probably call me the most heinous person in the world when it comes to election security. As of 2020, I still hadn't heard of Thad Snider, and I like his zeal, and I like that he's fighting for election integrity. But the notion that somebody who wasn't there during those fights, didn't show up at the legislature, didn't campaign on election integrity, didn't do anything, and suddenly he proclaims himself the voice of election integrity. That's fine. We welcome him to the battle. But this notion that somehow Kris Kobach, isn't doing enough. Now that's just up to my becoming Attorney General. Since I've become Attorney General, here are 4 things we've already done in the less than a year that I've been here. First, the Attorney General's office, my office, issued an Attorney General opinion stating clearly that when there is a recount, the actual ballots must be recounted, not images of the ballots.
Yes, I remember that. Yep.
That is an important point of law that was being disregarded, shall we say, by some election officials. Second, I appeared in the Kansas Supreme Court and personally argued the case defending our proof of signature requirement. That was important for me. And the Attorney General himself, appears in a relatively small number of cases, but that is the case that I've also appeared in some of the cases defending our SB 180 law, which says you can't change the sexes on birth certificates and driver's licenses. But that was so important to me that I wanted to be the attorney arguing that case. And I have argued many cases across the federal courts of the United States. And this one was in particular in the Kansas Supreme Court. Number 3, many of your viewers may be aware that there was a legislative battle in 2023 where I was asking the legislature to get rid of ballot drop boxes. And we had a very unusual confrontation in that committee where the Secretary of State, the current Secretary of State, who favors ballot drop boxes, and I were disagreeing. And we were going head to head telling the committee that we favor opposite points of view on this issue. I think I'm right. I think most of your viewers would agree that ballot drop boxes are unnecessary and they facilitate fraud. And so that was number 3. Number 4, we are actively investigating a voter fraud crime right now. I can't say more about it, but I would just point out that ever since I wrote the law that was enacted in 2015, giving the Attorney General and the Secretary of State prosecution authority, I'm the only Secretary of State who's exercised that authority, and assuming that this pending investigation leads to charges, the only Attorney General who's ever exercised that authority.
Okay.
So I found it particular.
Are you referencing 25-2435, the one that you wrote, that statute?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I found it particularly amusing that in your prior interview with Thad, he says, I spoke to Kris Kobach's chief of staff, and he said that they don't have the authority to prosecute election crimes. I think Thad maybe wasn't listening carefully. I believe what my chief of staff said is we have the authority to prosecute election crimes. We don't have the authority to administer elections. That belongs and exists in Kansas law in the Secretary of State's office. Okay. So if there is an election crime, your viewers can rest assured we will go after it.
Is this the and you might not be able to comment, and we understand that you might not. He mentioned an investigation being conducted by Johnson County Sheriff Calvin Hayden, and there are some documents that were protected by your predecessor, a stay of destruction order, some such thing. Is this the case you're talking about? Is this the investigation you're talking about?
It is not that.
Okay.
That document protection order is still in effect. It doesn't need to be reiterated for it to be in effect. I will say that on that subject, that it is important to distinguish between bad election management and committing an election crime. Mr. Snider came to our office and said, look what's happening. This Chinese company, Konnech, has got custody of these voting records in Johnson County. In my opinion, that's a very bad idea. And it is something that should not happen because we don't want our election records to be anywhere near a location that the Chinese Communist Party could control. However, bad policy is not a crime unless it is specifically defined in Kansas law as one of the election crimes. There's a list of about a dozen election crimes. With election forgery, impersonating an election officer, intimidating voters. They're laid out very clearly. And if there is a crime, rest assured, we'll go after it. But I found it disconcerting that someone who purports to be a conservative wants to just go after any bad policy and put somebody in jail for that bad policy just because it's bad policy. We live in a country where there's the rule of law. You can't be thrown in jail unless there is a crime that you have committed and you have met all of the elements of that crime. And as much as I agree with him that that's bad policy, I can't throw somebody in jail or prosecute somebody for doing something that is not a crime. So it's important to understand that Kansas law, every state's law, defines crimes. And you have committed a crime if you do this, A, B, and C, and those are the elements of the crime. Making bad policy, it's not a crime.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, with the Kansas State Attorney General, Kris Kobach. Kris, the case that I mentioned, the one that Sheriff Hayden is involved with, and according to Thad Snider, the Johnson County Commissioner Mike Kelly has commissioned a bipartisan, quote unquote, committee to look into the possibility of getting rid of these documents that are supposed to have the stay of destruction order. Do you know anything about it? Can you comment on that? Is it true?
I have not heard about Commissioner Kelly's, what you're describing as his latest move, in that we will certainly be watching it. If they're intending to violate that stay of destruction request, then that's certainly something that would be, potentially illegal and certainly troubling. But as long as that stays in place, they should not be doing that.
Okay. And I think that's the rub for a lot of us. As I watched from the peripheral of this, that was concerning to me as well. And you're saying that, look, as Attorney General, if you were to become aware of factual evidence that would indicate that these documents were being pursued for destruction, that would be something your office would look into?
We would absolutely look into it.
Okay.
But bear in mind, and I'm not making a comment about that particular set of documents. Again, we have looked very carefully, and we continue to look very carefully at a number of things that are happening in our state. And if there is an election crime, if the behavior matches the behavior defined as a crime, people should rest assured we're going to go after it. And I'm fairly certain that there will be something announced in the coming weeks. Again, the investigation is still underway, and we won't prosecute anything unless the elements of a crime are clearly there. But we do not look the other way when anything involving election fraud happens. And anyone who knows me knows that this is a cause that has been near to my heart for many, many years.
Okay. Well met, Mr. Attorney General. I appreciate you very much coming on at the last minute here this afternoon on the program. I appreciate you and your team making time for us. We stand with you in your office. On this program, we certainly notice and pay attention to election integrity issues. They're one of the key factors that drive us and motivate us, and we appreciate your efforts in keeping the state of Kansas in line with regards to all of it. I think you've been in your career, quite frankly, a role model for every state in the union when it comes to election integrity.
Thank you. I just wish more states would follow Kansas's lead and do what we can. But as I mentioned at the beginning, no matter how good our laws are, the people who want to commit election fraud, whether on a small scale or a large scale, will still try to find ways around it. And that's one thing I've learned over the years fighting in this arena, is you can never completely seal the system against fraud. And so that's why you have to have people willing to prosecute the crimes, people willing to investigate the crimes. And I will continue to do that. That's why I drafted that law, giving the authority to prosecute election crimes, both to the Secretary of State and to the Attorney General, so that there would always be someone, hopefully, willing to investigate, willing to look. And of course, it also resides in the county attorneys. So there are three different entities: the county attorney, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of State. And I believe, and we're the only state that has that, by the way. And that's what.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Well, and that's, looking at this issue for so long, for I guess going on 14 years now. That's one of the things I've learned, is you've got to have people willing to investigate and prosecute where there is a crime. And unfortunately, in most states, their election fraud occurs, but the The individual who's given the authority to prosecute has never done a case like that before, may have a conflict of interest, may just not be comfortable doing that kind of case. And that's why in Kansas, we have 3 potential prosecuting entities to make sure that when election crimes occur, they do get prosecuted. And people can rest assured that I will enforce the law, and I'm all about the rule of law here. But that also means you don't go too far in our constitutional republic and you try to manufacture a crime when all you're really looking at is bad policy. We absolutely have to recognize the rule of law, recognize the constitutional limits on anyone's power, no matter how well-intentioned they may be, because ultimately, at the end of the day, as our founding fathers recognized, the biggest threat to our rights comes from government, not from other private individuals. And that's why they designed the Constitution, to put our government in a cage. And so we must always recognize that when government exercises its powers, it must exercise only those powers that are precisely given to the government through the Constitution and relevant statutes, and not an ounce more, because that is the ultimate protection of our liberties, the limits on power and our Constitution.
Well, that certainly resonates over here. And just to tie this particular issue up, we had gentleman Thad Snider on the program earlier, and in general, and let me just summarize my impression of your response. If there were a crime being committed, Thad Snider shouting from the mountaintops about a specific issue, if it were, or if it becomes criminal, your office, according to you, would be committed to look into that.
Absolutely. And as I say, stay tuned.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had the honor to have Kansas State Attorney General Kris Kobach on the program this afternoon in response to an interview we had earlier today. We're going to air both programs again and give the audience the full scope of Mr. Kobach's comments and response, and we appreciate you watching and tuning in to The Right Side with Doug Billings. Again, Mr. Attorney General, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Take care.
And Merry Christmas to you and your family.
You too.
Thank you.
The Right Side with Doug Billings. The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that you could change the trajectory of your aging process? Look and feel better, live younger, be more active, less pain when you move around, sleep better, diminish the lines and the wrinkles on your face? Really? This is what I'm telling you. It's possible. You see, low stem cell activity happens when we get older, and it could be causing many of the health problems that some people have in the world today. Because as we get older, we have less stem cell activity, which means we age faster and we heal slower. The secret is a clinically proven and patented phototherapy non-transdermal patch, whose technology is the result of over 90 clinical studies and over 20 years of research. Your healthier life can begin today, and you can discover true age reversal. Age reversal, ladies and gentlemen. Please go to liveyoungerwithdoug.us. liveyoungerwithdoug.us, ladies and gentlemen. Get over there today. Or if you'd like, text my name, Doug, to 41372. Doug, text it, 41372. And get over to liveyoungerwithdoug.us. Get younger, feel younger. I'm doing it. I'm wearing this patch. I feel great, and so will you. God bless you, ladies and gentlemen. For the Republic. Cheers.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.